From the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
Welcome to the fifth week of a 8-week series entitled Journey Through Time, the Historical Human Quest for the Good Life. On this fifth program, we're going to deal with the subject, the historical human quest for economic security. For our viewers who have been watching over these different weeks, you can see that we have taken certain very important concepts or themes in people's lives throughout history, and we look at that struggle and that quest. We are very, very fortunate to have as our guest today a man highly qualified to talk about this very important question of economic security. I welcome to the program Dr. T. Hensley Williams. Our guest is an accomplished employee and labor relations professional consultant with over 20 years' experience in that field. He is involved in human resources management executive positions. He has been a frequent speaker for employee associations, professional organizations, and community groups around the United States. Our guest holds a BA degree in government from Southern Illinois University, and he holds a Doctor of Jurisprudence from Golden Gate University School of Law in San Francisco. Dr. Williams is the Director of Human Resources at the Iowa State Board of Regents, where he has responsibility for 20,000 employees. He also is a management consultant and co-owner of the Williams Group, and he does consulting, as I've indicated, around the United States. Our guest has published articles in a number of medical and business journals and conducts these seminars and workshops for various organizations. He also spoke at our institution, North Idaho College, today. Dr. Williams, welcome to the program. It's just a delight to have you in our community, and you have been already very, very energizing with your comments you've made, and we look forward to this interview.
Thank you very much, Tony. I appreciate it.
And I'm very pleased to welcome our regular panel members. First of all is Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in the state of Idaho, and next to her is Steve Schenck, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and I shall ask Janelle Burke to commence today's questioning.
This is such a wonderfully interesting subject that we're going to talk about today, and we don't have a great deal of time, but we do need to get some history in order to understand where we're going. We can't understand where we're going if we haven't talked about where we've been. So what has happened with labor and work in the United States, say perhaps from around the turn of the century?
Well, to answer your question, we have, and it's so great that we have an opportunity in this forum, the historical quest. The overarching theme was the search for the good life. And some of the subcomponents have been the family, equality, justice, freedom, spirituality. And an important component is economic security. Now, economic security to me is not always about a job. It's not always about money. But it's rather difficult to be secure if one doesn't have a job or one doesn't have money. And one of the things that, you remember the old commercial, Bo knows sports? Well, I know work. That's what I do. And I am a student. Not only am I a practitioner and a consultant and an executive, but I am a student of work. And what I have noticed, and I get so much information from my travels in these three mediums, is that if we look at 1900, we basically had an agrarian society. I think 44% of total employment was people worked on farms. And manufacturing in 1900 was maybe 20%, and approximately 29% in 1950. Now let me tell you what's interesting now, is the agrarian economy is now down to 3% right now, and manufacturing is 15%, and the service industry is 77%. What's happening? We've had a shift. Not only have we had a shift from agrarian to manufacturing to service, we have had a shift within industries, and that's a point that many people overlook. There are less people in manufacturing. We're down to 15%, yet our output is 50% more. Now, how is that? We have less people. A classic example is what happened in Fremont, California, they call it the NUMMI plant. That was a partnership between Toyota and American business. And basically what they said is, we're going to join in a partnership and we're going to put out quality cars. They did something very interesting. They fired every industrial engineer. They would not allow architects in the plant. They asked the workers to please design the plant. These were not people who had BA degrees in engineering and whatever. These were people who worked the plant. That has been one of the most successful enterprises in this country. About 3 years prior, GM did almost the exact same thing, except they said, we know what we're doing and we're going to use technology to replace the worker. It was a dismal failure, because what they overlooked is the thing that has had the most impact in this country. Technology, but not technology to replace the worker, but technology to complement, and it's complement with an E. If my old English teacher were alive, she would remind me of that. And that is what we have. We have rapid change. That change has caused all of us some form of stress. The individual is worried about whether he or she will have a job. Corporations are worried about whether or not they will have profits. The government is worried about whether or not we're going to be able to deal with all of these challenges. And to me, that is what has been happening in the world of work, is that nobody knows the answer. There is now, in my opinion, a level playing field. We need some answers. But before we get to the answers, we need to ask the right questions. What is it we're doing right, and what can we build on it? What is it we're doing wrong, and we don't need to point fingers and wring our hands and blame people and find scapegoats. What can we do as individuals, as people in education, as people in government, as people in business, to meet in a community of what I would like to call a community of interest, working toward a common goal? The economy is booming. Tell that to the man on the street. He is still concerned, she is still concerned about being downsized. I can show you every kind of economic indicator that would suggest we're on our way and we're going to go into the millennium in smashing fashion. I cannot convince an hourly employee. I cannot convince a manager. I cannot convince a shareholder that all is well.
Steve Sheen.
Dr. Williams, has the shift from an agrarian and manufacturing economy to a service economy been a good or a bad thing for the average American worker?
Well, the problem is with change, there's always, when there are new changes, the old ways are often destroyed. So if I had a good job on a farm and you tell me good news, but I don't have a farm, I'm not going to be too happy. But to answer your question overall, it has been good. It has allowed us to do things that we couldn't do just 5 or 10 years ago. However, for many of us, it is traumatic. I'm a classic example. I hid from computers until 1987. I did everything known to man to hide from computers. I was telling the story that I could not imagine how could I type my thoughts on a computer at the same time I was thinking, because you write. I had an occasion last week to write a letter. First off, I couldn't read it because my handwriting is so bad. Second, I'm so used to now taking my ideas and typing them, it was impossible for me to write a letter. But now where I could write one letter in 1 hour, I can write 10 letters in 15 minutes.
You mentioned a moment ago that 77% of the American workforce is now employed in service-related industries.
Yes.
as you look forward to the year 2000 and beyond, do you see that trend continuing or building, or is it going to reverse somewhat?
The statistics tell us that by the year 2005, 80% of the workforce will be in service, and that we will have a different kind of worker, even in our blue-collar fields. Matter of fact, we will probably have gray-collar workers who are high-performance, highly trained, computer-literate persons who not only will manufacture the product, but they will have input on the critical aspects of its manufacturing. So for those who think that I don't want to go to college and I can go and be a mechanic, try to work on a Volvo today yourself.
Thank you.
Okay.
I want to talk about those statistics you have given about the service industry. When we were a industrial state that was heavily in the manufacturing arena or
yes.
heavy industry, those jobs paid very, very well. Or a lot of people moved from rather low income into very comfortable upper middle income, and labor unions played a role in that,
right.
in the automobile industry, et cetera. The service industry, as I understand certain portions of it, it's very difficult to pay in the same way. For example, fast food restaurants and so forth can't pay and still have the customer to come if the hamburger reaches a certain price. So, and some statistics we look at it talking about the economic gap.
Right.
Even though you have indicated real optimism as we move towards the future, which is encouraging, but how are we going to cope with this gap that is creating, in many people's lives, less economic security, in the sense that both, if there's a couple, both of them are working, and between the two of them they're still not able to adequately pay payments on homes, cars, and educate their children?
Well, that could lead to a very controversial conclusion. I have a colleague, Dr. Michael Murray, who's a professor at Drake University, and Mike is a little bit ahead of me in terms of thought. Mike just wrote a book that suggests that in this country we ought to consider a guaranteed adequate income. It is his belief that we ought to provide every person in this country enough money, whether they work or not, to lead a basic life. And it is his contention that rather than people taking that basic income and not working at all that will do is build a foundation, and because of our system, people will want to add to it. I don't know if I'm quite there with Mike on that, but it's a very provocative book. The title is An Economic Justice for All is his title. I happen to believe that we are going to need, I call it the McConomy. We are still going to need McDonald's and Burger Kings, because I don't cook and neither does my wife. But I think we have not everyone is going to be a professional, a manager, or a technician. Okay, but I think everyone deserves an opportunity to have a basic lifestyle that allows for health care. No one should be without health care in this country. No one, in my opinion, should be without a retirement plan in this country. No one should have to worry about whether he or she has a roof over their head. Now whether it's the Taj Mahal is another issue. And I think those are the questions that we have to ask, and we have to meet as a people to determine a response. A significant number of the blue-collar jobs are being replaced by professional, technical, and managerial jobs. However, not all of these jobs pay as much as some of the high-paying blue-collar jobs. There were many blue-collar jobs that were paying $60,000, $80,000 a year. So now the question becomes, do we all need two 26-inch Trinitron TVs in our homes? Do we all need BMWs in our driveways? And that's the real issue, because if you take a look at how our advertisements go, no kid can possibly be seen without a pair of $100, $200 Michael Jordan shoes. No professional worth his or her salt could be seen in anything less than a sports utility vehicle for $25,000. And so we need to rethink what our needs are. We need to, you hear a lot about values. Are you a better person because you drive a Porsche? Are you a better person because you made $80,000?
I guess I would look at that in another component here too. That is, we hear a lot about downsizing, and this morning you were very clever in the different terminology that you showed our students and others about what this is called. But I'll just use the one called downsizing. And as people are losing their positions or companies are curtailing certain operations, oftentimes they look at removing those employees who are been there longer because they make more. Is that how a company should decide what's best for
it's not good
both the worker and for the future of the company?
In a word, it's not good business and it's illegal. It's not good business because oftentimes you're veterans. That's your company culture. That's your history. And there have been numerous examples of organizations who have removed their veteran employees. They have no culture, they have no history, they have no direction. These are the people that bring the youngsters in and said, hey kid, here's how we do things here. And legally, if you terminate a person and your justification is not based on business necessity or performance, the burden is on you as the employer to prove why you let that person go. And if you say, well, look, it's obvious I'm trying to save money. We have certain laws like the the Age Discrimination in Employment Act is a good one. And no one says that a company shouldn't do those business activities that allow them to either make money or save money. But when your primary goal is to relieve people, qualified performing people, and you replace them with even equally qualified people, and that's always debatable, the risk is still yours as the employer. I do not think it's good business. You cannot ask your remaining workforce to be loyal to you when they have seen what has happened to their mates.
Yes, thank you. Janelle Burke.
I would like to ask you about the gap between the top paid persons and the general workers in a corporation, and in many large corporations there's a significant difference. What is going to be the eventual outcome of that if we're looking at going into the next century?
It reminds me a lot of what happened when I was a soldier in Vietnam. Whether you believed in the war or not is not the issue. We were there and we had to do what we had to do. I will tell you, the officers who commanded the respect of the troops were the guys, and there were women, and a lot of people don't realize they're not in combat positions, but tell that to them when they were getting bombed. The fellows who had come up through the ranks, who would take care of their troops, who would say, fellas, here's where we're going, and here's why we're going, and here's why I need you. They would follow those officers through anything, because the officers made more than we did. They made the decisions, but they went with us. When we went into the bush, they were there in front of us, okay? Unlike in business. Now, we did not deal with the young guys who came through officer candidate school, who knew nothing about war, and said, let's go take that hill. So we're not going. And I can assure you that a lot of that occurred in Vietnam. Look at what's happening in business. It's real easy to tell me to take a pay cut and to work one less day and tell me you're not going to help me with my health insurance, and I find out you get a $120 million bonus. You're not going to lead me. I may not intend to, but I'll take Fridays and Mondays off as personal health days. When I find an opportunity to save the company a few bucks, hey, let so-and-so do it. He's making $120 million. And I think that is going to cause some difficulty, because another phenomenon has occurred. In a lot of these layoffs, quite a few middle managers have been laid off. So you don't have even the cushion of the middle manager between the highly paid person who has no idea what's going on and the worker. I think that we're going to have to calibrate that. I think that the American worker is one of the most powerful entities in the world. And I think business is starting to realize that. I'm noticing now, rather than the worker having to adjust to the workplace, smart companies are now adjusting to the worker. Flex time, telecommuting, shared jobs, part-time, portable benefits, portable retirement. 5 years ago, there was no dialogue.
Steve Sheen.
Dr. Williams, when you survey the business landscape, and I'm thinking particularly in terms of labor management relations, and not just labor unions, but workers and management, what do you see out there that you particularly like, and what do you see out there that's particularly troubling?
I like the fact that management and labor, whether it's unionized or not, are starting to realize that a meaningful dialogue has to occur. And it cannot be a dialogue that does not have a resolution. Management cannot make it without labor. Labor cannot make it without management. Now, whether you want to call it management, it's real trendy these days to use words like coaching, cheerleading, fan, whatever, anything but a manager. But sooner or later, somebody says, we have to do this. Mm-hmm. Sooner or later, whatever you want to call it, coach, manager, whatever. And smart management is saying we must reach out. We don't know all the answers, and management is asking its workforce to work with it in a partnership. The flip side of that, though, is that management must be sincere. It cannot be bogus. It has to be real. It has to be done in good faith, because even if they fail in the mutual endeavor, that's understandable. We tried, it didn't work, let's try her again. What I don't like are situations in which individual persons, for their own gain, are not able to look at the greater good, where managers are not interested in an end product. I'm going to come here and I'm going to make my name for myself and I'm going to move on. It's quite similar to what people are saying is happening in athletics, okay? Or the employee, I'm going to try to get as much as I can and I'm not going to do any work. That's not good. We need all hands on deck, and we need all committed to a course. That is what I'm hoping for. I think we're going to have a ways to go before we get there, but I am truly confident that the American workforce, and let me tell you, when I say workforce, I mean everybody that answers to the shareholders or the stakeholders, because the CEO has a job too. She's a worker as well.
If I can ask you one somewhat related question quickly. I know you got a son that you're very proud of. I'm going to ask you to think about all of those young people out there today who maybe are a little worried about what their prospects are of landing a good job in the future. What kind of advice do you give to people who are preparing to enter the workforce of tomorrow?
I would say to those people, first and foremost, no matter what, become computer literate.
Don't hide.
Don't hide, like I did. Become computer literate. Second, you must be able to communicate. You must be able to communicate to the people you work for. You must be able to communicate to the people you work with. And more importantly, you must be able to communicate to your client or your customer. I would also say, and this is something we say, and I think we as a country in business, industry, education, and government need to pay some serious attention to. We need to develop an environment that allows for critical thought. We talk about it, but we're not comfortable with critical thought, because critical thought may mean that I don't agree with you. Mm-hmm. And we need to be able to overcome that barrier, because that is going to be the thing that's going to carry us and make us successful in the millennium. So I'd say communications, computer literacy, and critical thinking. If you would ask me what, if I could break it down to its most simplest component, and it isn't, those would be the three things that I would say.
Thank you.
Dr. Williams, this has been such an exciting week, and this series that we're airing with our viewers is all on that line, and we've been looking at the past, mm-hmm. present, and then where we're going in the future. And I have a futurist question for you. President Clinton recently said that within 10 years that many young people in particular would be working at jobs that have not been created yet. And as you talk to large corporations in particular and businesses around this country and even internationally, I would love to tap your expertise. Give us some idea of the kind of employment we'll have in the future. You've mentioned what the skills should be, but and again, we look at the service industry, but can you be specific in what some of those jobs may turn out to be, or what may be disappearing?
A significant number are going to be computer related. I was telling somebody that next week I'm hoping to have a televideo set up in my home office that will allow me to talk with clients on the East and West Coast. I couldn't imagine that 2 years ago. President Clinton is absolutely correct in my judgment. I would go a step further. I would say 45% of the jobs that will be people by people between now and the year 2015 haven't been invented. I do a fair amount of work in healthcare. There are different types of machinery that presently used was not in existence 18 months ago. Okay? There are technicians who can read the results of machinery that cardiac surgeons don't know how to read. Okay? We're going to have, I believe, commerce without confines. Doesn't matter where you are, you will be able to work. Well, I would suggest to you that somebody's going to get tired of translation, and I think we already have it in some places. I need to talk to my colleague in Croatia. I need to talk to my colleague in South Africa. Jobs will be had.
So in the telecommunications is one area where there's going to be tremendous growth.
Technology, manufacturing, even though we're only going to have, I think it's predicted it's going to be about 12.5%, we still build things. The infrastructure, if you go on the East Coast, you will see that the infrastructure is being redone because it's falling apart. There will be jobs.
I've been given the signal that we're out of time, and I'm so sorry. We would love to continue. Dr. Williams, you're very exciting to talk to. But on behalf of our panel and our staff, we thank you for being with us at North Idaho College and being on this program. It has been very, very informative. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you will join us again next week when we will continue this series dealing with Journey Through Time, the historical human quest for the good life. And next week, our subject will be looking at the human quest as it relates to spirituality. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.